from the financial crisis on, right? Like people know that they need to watch the Fed. Is the Fed raising or lowering short-term interest rates? But to understand the true financial conditions that are affecting the economy and the markets, whether there's a tightening or easing in those conditions, requires so much more. It's more complex today. Following the financial crisis, it became about quantitative easing. When the Fed couldn't lower short-term interest rates any farther, it had hit its lower bound. With the pandemic, there's so much more happening with fiscal policy and fiscal stimulus and, even regulatory policy. I'm curious, how do you think about and assess the impact of each of these when you're shaping your macro outlook and investment strategies? How do you kind of get your head around how all of these different policy responses are impacting the economy?
Yeah, I think most people will think about those individual pieces in a way that's relatively discrete and almost in a way that's like a diffusion index. Is this positive? Is this negative? Is it supportive? Is it contractionary? And I think the key thing you have to do from a macroeconomic perspective is not just understand the nature of the linkages of fiscal policy or quantitative tightening or the rise in interest rates, but you have to translate that into a concrete and numerical understanding of the magnitude of the influence of those activities. And I think that's the thing that's it's both a very hard thing to do because you have to work through all of those linkages and the quantification of them. And it's also the area that I think a lot of folks will miss. And so whether it's the data that you're looking at or the linkages of monetary, fiscal, and say regulatory policy, that's what you have to do. And so too often folks look for confirmatory evidence in, say, data that is aligned with their views without going through that process. I think like a funny one that came up recently is the Empire Fed manufacturing index went down a lot earlier this week, the week that we're recording. And, how many charts did we see on Twitter about that? And that survey, first of all, is a pretty bad survey in terms of quality, but also it only represents 0.6% of the economic activity of the economy. Yet when you get, a positive confirmatory dynamic like initial claims being at 2-year lows, people don't necessarily want to reject that evidence when that is a high quality, comprehensive coverage of the overall economy. And so that's where you have to get into the nuts and bolts and really quantify these things and not rely sort of on the narrative senses of what's likely to be, what one data point or set of policies is pointing to versus another.
Yeah, 0.6 doesn't sound much, not too far off from Taylor Swift's effect.